Oh, good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone ESPN. Our guests join us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. This is 105.9 The Zone ESPN. We're streaming on YouTube right now, live on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports. We welcome in our friend Jeff Duncan. NOLA.com, Saints NFL Insider. Jeff Duncan, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Bo. I'm doing good, man. Good to hear from you.
Well, first of all, thanks for hanging out with us because I know it's a busy time for you with training camp. But before I get into the Saints and their super easy schedule and what a great opportunity this is for them this year, as someone who covered Sean Payton start to finish in New Orleans, who wrote a great book on Peyton and Breeze and has hung out with Sean socially, and you know how he works and ticks and runs hot. Were you even surprised? Did you think it was a little out of bounds that he went after Nathaniel Hackett the way he did a couple weeks ago, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bo, and I tell you, if I can hedge there, I kind of was surprised and wasn't surprised at the same time. But like it didn't surprise me. He was candid and unvarnished and unfiltered in his comments. I guess what surprised me was that he used his name and went directly after Hackett. That kind of crossed the line a little bit. I think he could have. If he would have just stayed by saying overall it was one of the worst coaching jobs and just kind of left it as the staff and maybe anonymously figured out who it was he was targeting. But to name the coach was a little out of line and out of character, and I think he walked it back a day later. And I think a lot of that comes from the ownership out there, the Walton Penner Group, who I know Sean Payton is very excited about working for and has great respect for them. And look, they kind of stuck their necks out to hire Sean Payton last year, and for him to kind of immediately put his foot in his mouth, I think probably didn't sit well with them, and that's probably why he walked it back so quickly.
Okay, Jeff Duncan on the Out of Bounds Show covered Sean for 15 years. What wouldn't you say there's an unwritten rule somewhat about that in the NFL that you don't go there the way Sean did?
Not publicly. Yeah, not publicly. You're right. I think so. But that's also part of the package you get with Sean Payton. I mean, it's what you get. I mean, we saw it here in New Orleans, and Saints fans loved him for it, right? When he's doing the choke sign at Devontae Freeman during a game at a player on the field. I mean, that's certainly not normal or customary behavior by an NFL head coach. Saw him doing the skull clap mocking Vikings fans at a game in Minnesota and then losing the game a few minutes later. That's you don't see a lot of head coaches doing that. So that's part of what I think endears him to some fans, but also what I think polarizes him among other NFL fans. And I remember writing a column, Bo, probably 5 years ago, saying that Sean Payton was single-handedly making the Saints one of the most hated teams in the league.
Yes, I remember when you wrote that.
Yeah, because of his actions, and he took offense to that. I had conversations with him about it, but it was true. It was true because fans love to hate him, but Saints fans I think loved Sean Payton because for years this organization had sand kicked in their face by the 49ers and the Rams and other division teams, and now they had the bully on the block. And I think they loved that when he was here.
Sure they did. No doubt. Jeff Duncan, Saints Insider on the Out of Bounds Show, wrote a great book on Sean Payton and Drew Brees and has covered Sean from the jump in New Orleans. Now, obviously, he's with the Broncos. We'll see what they do. He's already making noise, as Jeff and I are talking about. He's great for Sports Talk Radio and for Jeff. Well, as far as coaching fraternity, Jeff, and I don't mean you're not going to get along with everybody in any walk of life, but do you think Sean's got a bunch of buddies, or do you think because he runs so hot and some of the things you just referenced, he may have a few, but not that many? How do you see it?
I think he's got more colleagues and people in the business on his side than would be against him. But
Okay.
he certainly has alienated probably Robert Saleh and that staff for sure. That game, I think Week 5 against the Jets is going to be great theater. There's no doubt about it. But, he had that before in New Orleans. Remember him and I'm trying to remember the coach with the Bucks that he kind of got into it at the post-game handshake. I think it was Dirk Cutter maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's had these kind of snafus with people before in the past. I remember him at the NFL owners meetings in Scottsdale, Arizona, a few years back when asked a question by a national media representative about the trend of hiring young assistant coaches, offensive-minded coaches, without a lot of skins on the wall, without a lot of big resumes. And I remember him plainly saying, yeah, we look forward to playing against those coaches. It was a very cocky thing to say. That's Sean Payton. And I'm sure we all know who they were referencing, right? It was the Sean McVay tree that now has grown so wide around the league. So I'm sure that group, but I know for a fact that he and Sean McVay are very tight. And
I could
great
see that.
respect for each other. Yeah. So I think sometimes we get caught up in it a little more with the headlines than what really goes on in the league.
Would you say, how people are talking about since last year with Phil Mickelson and the whole Live Tour and Alan Shipnuck with the book on Phil. And now there's another book coming out this week by Billy Walters, who was his gambling business partner, and how Phil runs hot. Would you say that Sean Payton runs hot?
Oh, yes, for sure. And I think more it's more of a reaction from coaches around the league of like, oh, there goes Sean again. That's Sean. I mean, I guarantee you that's what Mickey Loomis was thinking when he read those comments sitting in his office on Airline Drive. Well, there we go again. He's now Denver's problem, not mine. But they all love Sean Payton and respect him. But it's kind of like these are the things that come with him. And I personally, like you said earlier, I love it. I love somebody. I mean, I think the league and everyone's gotten so vanilla and cliched, and that's not Sean Payton. So I love that side of it.
No, I do too. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com, does a great job covering the NFL and the Saints. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line, knows Sean Payton really well. Have you I know y'all have hung out before, outside of the work relationship that y'all had. I do think it's pretty cool that at times over the years he would get mad as hell at you and he could then shake it and then move on. You don't find that in collegiate athletics, or I haven't for the most part. But have you hung out with him like in that year, during the year off or in the last year and change? Have you hung out with him any, Jeff?
No, I haven't. And that's mainly because of, being buried in this book project I'm doing with Steve Gleason, where we're just 24 hours working on the book. So I have talked to Sean, especially during the off season. He now lives in the off season out in Idaho at Gaza Ranch. If you've ever been out to Lake Coeur d'Alene, it's a beautiful part of the country. And he likes the West Coast living. It's close to his daughter, Megan, who's based in L.A. Now that he's in Denver, it's easy for him to get around. He hangs out a lot with John Elway and Wayne Gretzky. They all live in the same development, play a lot of golf together. So he's got a good life going right now.
Wow.
He's very happy right now with where things are at.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I'd love to hang out with Wayne Gretzky. What about, did you see where he got the Jordan brand? Sean Payton got the Jordan brand deal, and how fitting is that, Jeff?
Well, he's had that deal.
Oh, okay.
I think it got re-upped maybe.
Okay.
But he had it when he was here with the Saints and used to wear those shoes, and he was the envy of all the players on the team because he had a Jordan brand endorsement. I think he's the only coach, if I remember correctly, in the league that has that deal.
That's incredible.
And he's hung out with Jordan down at. They often go down to Jordan to the golf club that he belongs to down in the Miami area and play with him down there. And I think Mickey Loomis has gone down there together. Yeah, he's got a unique kind of star power, I think Sean Payton does, and kind of fascinates people. It's funny. I find it funny, Bo, that when I tweet about him on my social media platform, there's a real divide among the fan base. And I think it's really reflective of the tribal nature of sports. Now that Sean Payton's not the Saints head coach, there's a lot of people that get upset that I'm talking about him, but yet people are fascinated by him.
Right.
So I'm not going to stop talking about Sean Payton because he's the greatest coach in the history of the organization, and certainly should be respected for what he did here in turning this franchise around.
No question. I've told you briefly the story about my aunt owning 2 restaurants down there in New Orleans, and she had tickets in the 80s, and it got to the point where I was telling my dad that I didn't want to go. That's how miserable it was. I mean, and for a kid, you would think whenever somebody said, let's go to an NFL game, you know, you're already running to the car, right? And that's how terrible and boring. God, they were boring. And Sean and Drew and Mickey rebooted that whole thing. It's funny you say that about Sean Payton, Jeff. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com, writing a book on Steve Gleason, wrote a book, Peyton and Breeze, great book on the behind the scenes of that duo, Hall of Fame duo, and resurrecting the Saints. It's same thing with in our area. That applies to Hugh Freeze because he's so talented, so polarizing, Jeff, and was at Ole Miss and caught lightning in a bottle and had a couple of monster years. And now all of a sudden he's at Auburn, and that is a division, rival.
Right.
And I'll have some people go, well, why do you talk about Hugh Freeze? I'm like, because people, it's a tribal split thing like you're talking about, man. People jump right in and have an opinion, and you find that to be the case with Sean.
It reminds me a little of like my alma mater, University of Louisville, when they hired Rick Pitino in the state of Kentucky. I mean, you can imagine what that was like, right? Him going to the rival and building up that program. I get it, but I find it funny. I find this same nature, human nature, being illustrated in Jimmy Graham. When Jimmy Graham played for the Saints, extremely popular player. And then, when he was traded to Seattle, there was a segment of the fan base that was kind of good riddance. So he was trying to get paid like a wide receiver when he was a tight end. And people tend to paint someone negatively after they move on. It's an ugly side, I think, of humanity where there's got to be something wrong with him. They did the same thing with Brandon Cooks when he got traded. That he was a cancer in the locker room. There was a problem. He had a bad attitude, and now he's back, and everyone's got open arms again to Jimmy Graham, and they're loving him. And he got a huge round of applause yesterday when he was introduced over the PA system. It's just the tribal nature, especially I think in our region. I don't know why, especially in Louisiana. I think we're just so different here that we kind of rebel against the rest of the United States in some ways, but I've noticed it a lot with players and coaches. When they're here, they're all in, and when they're gone, you're part of them. You're no longer a part of us.
Well, all right, so where are Saints fans gravitate? Who are they gravitating to right now? Like, you had these 2 Hall of Famers for so long who gave them what they never thought that they would have, and that's a consistent winner and a Lombardi trophy, and Sean, for the most part, lived in the playoffs. Dennis Allen is pretty boring, I think, but you may know him and you may think he's a riot or whatever. Now, Derek Carr, I think, is a good player, man, and this schedule looks good, but who are the Saints like putting their claws, who are the fans kind of putting their claws into right now? Jeff?
Well, Alvin Kamara is definitely the most popular player on the team. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, even with his off-field incident and how he handled it, I think he handled it so well PR-wise recently that kind of eliminated any stain on his popularity. Obviously, Cam Jordan is still a very popular player, but there's no one in the universe of Drew Brees or even Sean Payton. And I think that's reflected also, nationally when you notice the Saints have very few primetime games this year.
Yes.
I can tell you, Bo, like by this time of training camp, we'd have had Peter King in and Jay Glazers and those those type of people of the world, none of them have been to Saints camp so far. I mean, the profile and Q rating of the New Orleans Saints is way down nationally, and they're going to have to win to kind of get it back, and that's why I think this is such a pivotal season.
It is. Okay, do you agree with me that this is about his best-case scenario schedule? The NFC South is down, and the AFC South, although it may be trending in a little bit better direction, but it's still not a monster. How do you see it? I think this is about as good a draw as Dennis Allen could have gotten.
100% agree. I was just talking with my editors about this at the game yesterday. I mean, the convergence of factors that work in the Saints' favor, they have to win this year, Bo. Dennis Allen has to win. It's set up in so many ways. When you look at the Atlanta Falcons and Carolina Panthers, where those organizations are at, they're in full-scale transition to young quarterbacks, and the rebuild of their rosters, everything's in front of them in the future. The Saints are all in now, and this schedule is so easy, even on paper, and I know some things turn out differently once the season starts, but they avoid all the elite quarterbacks in a league that's built around elite quarterbacks.
True.
They don't really have to face any of those. The schedule, the division, the fact that they were able to kind of the fortune of landing Derek Carr, those guys just don't become available very often. And you have to give Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis credit for going out and getting him and paying him and getting him here, because if they didn't get Derek Carr, I don't know what plan B was going to be. But I think they have to win this year with not only the fan base. I mean, season tickets were down. I've not been able to report this yet, but it's the first time, I think, since the Breeze-Payton era began in 2006 where season tickets were available. There's always been touted that there's this enormous waiting list of tens of thousands of fans. That's gone. That does not exist anymore.
Wow.
And I think that shows you the popularity of this team has definitely waned without those two stars around.
Wow. Okay. I've got buddies all around here in the metro area that have season tickets, and they talked about that for years as far as wanting to move around and couldn't. I even had a buddy who had a suite, and he couldn't get where he wanted to be. He wanted to move, and when Peyton and Breeze were there, it just wasn't happening. You make a good point on the quarterbacks, Jeff, and I know you've looked at this. You look at how many outside of the top 15 QBs or rookie inexperienced QBs that they're going to get to play this year. And I mean, I really think, what do you think, Jeff? I mean, 10-7, got to go 10-7. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. I think this team could be similar to the first Breeze-Payton team in 06. And if you talk to those guys, they'll tell you that team was not that good. They went 10-6 that year. And Sean likes to point this out. They got the number 2 seed in the playoffs at 10-6 and got a bye in the playoffs with a 10-6 record. There were years the Saints went 13-3 and didn't get a first round bye. So they were just fortunate that year. They started 3-1. The Gleason block punt. They kind of got off to that emotional start, and then they were about a 500 team the rest of the year. They really weren't that good. They got a home game in the playoffs, won it against the Eagles, and then pretty much got eliminated pretty easily by the Bears in the NFC Championship game. But they only had to play 2 playoff games. They really weren't that good, but they just kind of ground out wins after the 3-1 start. And I think this team could be like that. I don't necessarily think this team is any threat to win a Super Bowl or even a threat to the NFC power trio of the 49ers, Eagles, and Cowboys. But I do think they can easily win this division and get in the playoffs. And if you get a home game in the playoffs, you can certainly beat anybody in the Superdome. And that would be, I think, considered a very successful season.
Sure.
I think that's all within reach for this team.
Tell me where you think where Chris Olave is trending. We'll follow it up with Michael Thomas and what he needs to do. But Olave's first year and didn't have a great quarterback. Derek he may not be elite, but he is a good quarterback. Where do you see Olave's game trending this year, Jeff?
I think he's if Alvin Kamara is not the best player on the offense, it's definitely Chris Olave. I think he's the best player so far we've seen in training camp by far on offense. He's at another level of any other receiver on this team, and he's going to be the number one receiver. If you're a fantasy football player out there, it's not going to be Mike Thomas. It's going to be Chris Olave. He's separated himself. He's taken that second-year leap. He's playing with confidence. He definitely has a connection with Derek Carr. They worked together in the offseason. Olave went out to Vegas and trained with him.
That's
there's
good.
Trust there. There's a trust there. Michael Thomas, I know you're going to ask about him. He's still working his way back. I'm writing a column about him this week and tease that, which will go into detail about where he's at, some of the things he's having to work on, some of the bad habits he picked up in this downtime that he's had that they're trying to work through. And it's not there. And anybody that thinks Michael Thomas is going to be the guy that, was a Pro Bowl receiver and caught 100 balls, and that Mike Thomas is gone. He's not going to be that guy again.
Okay.
What I think you need to look for is he still can be a very productive role player in this offense. I think something above maybe what we saw from Larry Fitzgerald in his last few years in Arizona, where he uses his talent, his physicality, his smarts to make plays and contested catches, but everything is going to be contested with Mike Thomas. He's not going to run by anybody. He never could run by anybody, but after 3 surgeries on your feet, there's an effect of that. And so it's going to be difficult. And he's struggling right now. He's frustrated in practice because I think the reality is setting in that this is what he is. And I think he can still continue to get better, but it's not what I think these breathless social media posts that people were putting out in the first week from the local media corps. I was looking at that going, am I missing something? Because what I'm watching is not what I'm seeing on some of these social media posts.
Wow, his body's just failed him, right?
Well, yeah, there's certain routes where he's not going to be running them. He's not effective anymore. But there are routes, crossing patterns, over routes, slants, things like that, where he still can be very effective. He's still a big physical guy, great hands, but I think seeing certain kind of routes where he has to maybe go horizontally, make quick moves side to side, it's very difficult to come back from something like this. And the Saints coaching staff is very shrewd in this area. It's not just Mike Thomas. They know how to employ people to be successful and what they play to their strengths. And I think that's what they'll do with Mike Thomas.
That was fantastic. Jeff Duncan, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, Bo. Thanks.
NOLA.com. Jeff Duncan, at Jeff Duncan _ on Twitter. Love catching up with him. Talking Sean Payton. And Sean Payton running hot. And then the Saints. Great opportunity for Dennis Allen, Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Olave, DeMario Davis to at least make the playoffs. Maybe not an NFC championship team, but make the playoffs. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're driven by your next Nissan Pathfinder, all new body style, Cannon Nissan in Jackson. The Nissan Pathfinder and Rogue, powered by Cannon Nissan in Jackson.